So to that breaking news, of course, this evening, one of the American National Guard soldiers has passed away following the shooting near the White House yesterday afternoon. President Trump made this address to the nation moments ago.
Before we begin, I want to express the anguish and the horror of our entire nation at the terrorist attack yesterday in our nation's capital, in which a savage monster gunned down two service members in the West Virginia National Guard who were deployed as part of the D.C. task force, which has done such an incredible job. I mean, until yesterday, we literally had no incidents for many months. It was the safest place imaginable, and this is a different kind of crime. This is a really bad crime. Millions of Americans are praying for those heroes and their families, and I must unfortunately tell you that just seconds before I went on, right now, I heard that Sarah Beckstrom of West Virginia, one of the guardsmen that we're talking about, highly respected, young, magnificent person, started service in June of 2023, outstanding in every way. She's just passed away. She's no longer with us. She's looking down at us right now. Her parents are with her. It's just happened. She was savagely attacked. She's dead. She's not with us. Incredible person. Outstanding in every single way, in every department. That's horrible. As you know, the other young man is fighting for his life. He's in very bad shape. He's fighting for his life, and hopefully we'll get better news with respect to him. And the monster that did this is also in serious condition.
Well, that was President Trump speaking from Mar-a-Lago. It looks like the Oval Office, but that's actually, he's at home, of course. It's Thanksgiving today, but all of the people, it seems, working on this case have put that to one side and have thrown themselves into coming up with answers as to what happened yesterday. So President Trump has called for every Afghan national who entered America under the Biden administration to be investigated. So that came after the suspect was named as Ramanullah Lankanwal, a 29-year-old Afghan migrant and former Special Forces commander who the United States flew in to America under the Biden administration. It was part of that 2021 Kabul evacuation. I'm sure you all remember the pictures. It was chaotic. With me now is former New York City Lieutenant and National Guard Mike Gould. Mike, good evening. Thank you for joining me. So first of all, your response to that very sad news, actually, that the female Guards member has died.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bev. Yeah, of course, this is one of our holidays where it's the one day a year that we're grateful for all the things we have. So to lose this 20-year-old young woman, as you described earlier, a citizen soldier, it's heartbreaking when we're all sitting down giving thanks for what we have. There's a family right now within the last hours grieving the loss of their daughter, who did nothing more than volunteer, as you said before, to serve our country. So it's heartbreaking.
Tell us what motivates the young people, particularly, Mike, who become part of the National Guard, because we don't really have something similar in the UK. We have our territorial army, the Army Reserves. I suppose to some degree the comparison stands up. But tell us who the National Guard are and why people like Sarah would want to be part of it.
Right. So the National Guard, each state has a National Guard component, which is separate from the regular armed forces, the Navy, the Marines, the Army, and they serve in emergencies. They're activated either by the governor of the state or in certain instances like this, where the president has the authority to activate them for any kind of national emergency. When I was in the National Guard, I was activated I was in a medical unit, and we provided support at the Winter Olympics in upstate New York many years ago. So there are all kinds of specialties, and they do it for the country, I presume, the state. I mean, you know, that's, again, they're citizen soldiers, as you said. She may have been a student, and they do this. They volunteer, And it's, for some of us, it's very exciting. I enjoyed it. I was deployed many times all over the world in the Navy Reserve and the National Guard, but we weren't full-time members of the armed forces. So it gives, for me, it was a great, it was a source of great pleasure for me.
And as we've heard, Mike, she was only sworn in the day before. So how would she and Andrew Wolf, who's still in a critical condition, how would they have felt on that first day walking out? They've got their combat fatigues on, they're armed. What would that have been like for them? Yeah,
well, obviously, it's tragic. It's hard for me to believe that they just, I think there's some misinformation coming across because they have to attend training. There's a boot camp involved. There's certain training involved. So it's impossible, in my view, that they might have just been assigned there yesterday. I think what some sources that I talked to said she volunteered yesterday to work for other people so they could have the night off. So that information I don't find credible, that they just were sworn in yesterday. If it was, then that's, it shouldn't have happened then. I believe she was trained. There is a great deal of training that goes into this. So that's another element of this when we talk about are they trained in law enforcement activities and so forth. Every unit, like my unit, as I said, was a medical unit. There's transportation units. There's legal units. So there's these components all over our country, and they get deployed as needed in their specialty. So I don't quite understand that.
Yeah, I wonder whether there's been some miscommunication about the fact that, is it possible that she was fully trained and yesterday would have been her first day on the beat, if you like, for want of a better phrase?
That makes much more sense, Bev. That the other scenario is frankly impossible. So, and I heard the same thing. I heard that same reporting, but it would be virtually impossible to, get sworn in, given a uniform, and stand up in the middle of Washington, D.C. She's from a rural part of West Virginia. So, yeah, that would be virtually impossible. But I think she may have just maybe been assigned to that particular beat, as you said, or post yesterday.
Yeah, and obviously, Mike, this has now triggered a huge response from the Trump government. Kash Patel came out immediately. So did Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War. So did J.D. Vance, came out with a statement within the hour. Pam Bondi as well, who was very clear to say that should one of the injured succumb to their injuries, then she would be absolutely seeking the death penalty for first-degree murder for the perpetrator. What's your response to that affirmative reaction that we've seen?
Well, of course, I agree with it. Taking politics aside, look, our country, as you know, is completely divided. There's people on the left. Politicians should more or less stay out of it. We have a saying in law enforcement and the military: we don't write the music, we just play in the band. Congress is the ones that make laws, and Congress are the ones, not the military, not police officers. So my response is, of course, if this was an intentional act of murder, shot in the head, of course they should be seeking the death penalty if you have the proclivity to believe in the death penalty, which, of course, that also is debatable. But to the highest extent of the law, he should be prosecuted, obviously.
OK. All right. Thank you so much, Mike Gould there, former New York City Lieutenant and National Guard, joining us on Thanksgiving evening. So we really do appreciate it, Mike. Let's speak now also to the founder of the Blue Line Lawyer Institute, Lance LaRusso. Lance, again, same question, really. Just your response, first of all, to the tragic news that this young lady has passed away.
It's horrible. And, the public should see those National Guardsmen and women no different than the average law enforcement officer on the street. And I think I can clear up that issue about her being sworn in very recently. The National Guardsmen, when they're called up, they have different duties. As your last guest stated, she was actually sworn in as a law enforcement officer, most likely to enforce the law at that time. So that's why that would have come immediately prior to her deployment. All of her training would have been well before that.
Just clarify that again for me, if you don't mind, Lance. So she was sworn in as a law enforcement officer, which is separate to being a member of the National Guard.
Right. So when they're sworn in as the National Guard, they perform all sorts of duties, from relief duties to, as we saw during COVID, moving people back and forth to secure facilities. So the bottom line is when they're performing a law enforcement duty, typically they are sworn in by a law enforcement agency, by an official, so they can perform law enforcement duties and have arrest powers within that jurisdiction that they're in. So she was from West Virginia, and she was sitting in D.C. So she probably would have been sworn in as a law enforcement officer to have arrest powers. That's probably where the disconnect is.
I see. Okay, that's interesting. Now, I'm glad you raised the issue of different powers that these various enforcement officers have, because one of the criticisms of the National Guard that we hear, and there are a lot, is that they don't work well alongside the police. There's a bit of competition with the police and the FBI and the Secret Service that we also have here in Washington, D.C. But yesterday looked like an example where all of them worked beautifully together in the moment of drama, and that acute moment when they needed to pull together. Everything we've seen from the footage looks perfect.
Yeah, the nonsense you hear about the not working together is more sound bites for political gain. In my experience, when you have presidential visits, when you have catastrophes that happen, the National Guard is chomping at the bit. They're ready to help. They train with law enforcement. And the reason why that's such an interesting statement, I'll leave it at that, is the vast majority of National Guardsmen and women are from public safety. A lot of them are in law enforcement. So the notion that they don't work well with law enforcement officers is really nonsense.
Okay, that's interesting. And how rare is it, Lance, for National Guard people to be injured like this?
It's very rare. A lot of times they will work together with different law enforcement groups, or they'll be tasked together where there's 2 or 3. The problem is we've seen with ambushes of law enforcement officers, and that's who these 2 National Guardsmen were. This is getting a lot of publicity. It should, because you had 2 people who committed themselves to something bigger than themselves, and they were struck down. One of them was killed. The other one is fighting for his life. But when they are ambushed, this happens unbelievably frequently to law enforcement officers. It happens in the UK, it happens in Australia, it happens in the United States, knife attacks, gun attacks. And this notion that you have a law enforcement officer who is doing a lawful job, they are performing a function that they swore to do, and somehow someone will say there's any excuse for attacking them is absolutely ridiculous. And they were walking down the street and they were attacked. And to your question about murder, that fits not only the definition of murder, but it does qualify for some of the aggravating circumstances for the death penalty in most U.S. states.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. That's Lance LaRusso there, a Blue Line from the Blue Line Lawyer Institute. And again, thank you for interrupting your Thanksgiving evening to join us on GB News. My panel are here with me this evening. I'm delighted to say political commentator Thomas Corbett-Dillon and journalist and broadcaster Angelina McAhey. Thank you both for joining us. We thought we'd have a jolly Thanksgiving show today, and we are going to touch on Thanksgiving later. But Thomas, we can't not start with this awful turn of events yesterday. You live here in Washington. We see the National Guard. How do you feel about them being here? Do you feel differently now? Because some people are even saying this wouldn't have happened if you didn't have the National Guard, really politicising this. And my feeling to that was, well, if it hadn't been the National Guard, maybe it would have been civilians who were shot yesterday. Right,
and I think your words then summed up how all of America are feeling. Everyone was hoping to have a lovely Thanksgiving. You know, it's sort of what everyone needed after this year. And this has really put a dampener on everyone's dinners as they're sitting around their houses right now. But I think that's such a awful sentiment to say, you know, if they had they should never have been here, all of that stuff. Of course they should have been here. They've done a great job. DC is doing much better. But I think we can't, you know, overstate the precedent of this. I cannot find an example of this ever happening before. There has never been a case where a civilian has killed a National Guard member. There's been cases where, you know, someone is on a base and he's shot them, but they've had base access. They're usually other soldiers and things. There has never been a civilian that has gone up and killed a National Guard. So I think you are going to see a huge response to this. And I also think for the English audience to understand, I think in England, to be a 20-year-old is sort of seen as they're kind of adults. In America, a 20-year-old, remember, they can't even go into bars. Yeah. This is basically a child. She couldn't go to bars. She couldn't even drink. She technically had never drank alcohol in her life if she, you know, hopefully followed all the rules. Yeah. So this is so sad that this has happened. And I think all of DC and I think all of America are really, really upset about this. Yeah, it is upsetting, Angelina, isn't it? And there's something incredibly poignant about the fact that it's the day on which people are giving thanks for what they have. And there are 2 families who've had to be by a bedside when they were
when these two individuals that are on the screen now were just doing their duty to help their country. It's awful.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. I've talked to a lot of these National Guard members, and they are, put politics aside, they're here to do a job, and they've served for Biden administration, and they're serving for the Trump administration. They're here to serve and protect the American people, and to be only 20, it's absolutely heartbreaking. I went past the memorial earlier today. People are laying flowers, American flags. Really, the country is feeling the impact of this today.
Yeah, and it's only around the corner from here. All three of us will walk down that street every day. I pretty much walk down that street. It's almost equidistant between here in GB News Studios and the White House itself. There was some thought yesterday, was this an attack on the White House? The White House went into a lockdown, and it became obvious pretty quickly, Thomas, that this wasn't a skirmish. At first I thought, especially Lafayette Square around there, can be a bit sketchy in that area sometimes. There's quite a few homeless people that hang out in that park, and I wondered whether the National Guard should approach somebody. Maybe they'd ask them to empty their pockets or what, and something had happened. But it became obvious so quickly. This was literally in cold blood. He came around the corner where the National Guard was stood outside the hotel. We're seeing the footage of, this is the area that where it all happened, and he just gunned them down. Now that we know this is somebody that arrived on an aeroplane from Afghanistan, had worked with the American government, working with them as a spy, presumably a spy, or a part of the security services working for America in Afghanistan. How do you feel about the reaction of President Trump to that knowledge? It is so different to what would have happened had this occurred in the UK. We would have had some mealy-mouthed apology from Keir Starmer, who would have asked you all just to light a candle and it will all go away, and hope everybody ignores the bigger issues underneath. What's your take on President
I think
reaction?
that's exactly right. I think, what is it they said at the "don't look back in anger" seems to be the English standard. I think the Americans are actually very angry, and I think they have a right to be. And your point about his attack is actually very important, because as you see, you think this guy, he screamed at Allah Akbar and all of this, he thinks he's some sort of martyr. Well, he went after an unarmed woman, 20-year-old woman. They don't have, the National Guard do not have guns. They weren't armed. Meanwhile, he could have gone up to the White House and gone after the Secret Service guys with the big guns. If he wants to be a hero, he should have done that, but he wasn't. He's a coward, and he took the sort of easy way out. But I do think that I'm very happy that the president is in charge, because I think if we had a Kamala Harris presidency, we'd be seeing something very different. And now hopefully the US is going to go and look at all these people, because it doesn't bode well for the integration argument. And this guy worked closely with the troops in Afghanistan, and they then brought him over to come and live in America. Was he not grateful? This is how he repays the American people. So it's going to be a sort of big moment for America, I think.
Angelina?
Look, I think that this comes down to a huge moral question in America, and it's uniquely an American problem where we have this gun, political violence, this overlap. We're seeing a lot of that lone wolf violence this year. I don't think that we should blame all Afghanistan refugees or asylum seekers. Look, he did have a background with the CIA. He did help the U.S. You come back with some kind of PTSD. So what did the vetting process look like? I think that's the question we need to be asking. And also remember, his asylum case was approved under the Trump administration. So what did they miss, and what are they not looking for? That should be checked. Yeah,
he was approved in April of this year and given a permit to work. We also now know as well that he was a marijuana smoker, and we are seeing time and time again these lone wolf attacks. We had one similarly on a train in London just recently, and it turned out he was a marijuana smoker. That is always a part of this, it seems to be.